So, hey Joe, welcome to our Women in Tech webinar series. Thanks for joining us.
Pleasure.
From your home somewhere. Okay, today we're going to chat a little bit about digital skills and data literacy and tech skills. There's a lot of information in the sector that we're in at the moment about how important those are, not only just in tech roles, BI roles, but also across the business itself. And Gartner, we know, refers to kind of data literacy across the business as being key to have a data-led organization. So really that's the reason for the topic. And to introduce Joe Catalano is the president of Dentsu Aegis for Asia Pacific, and also has had many tech roles throughout her career. So really, Joe, we just wanted to talk to you a little bit about in those roles, how you've been able to develop yourself those type of skills, but also where you've seen that work really well across the organization, not just in, specific data analytics roles or BI roles, because I think a lot of people feel they need to be in those roles to get those skills.
Okay, great. So where would you like me to start? It's a topic near and dear to my heart. And, as you mentioned, has been with me, I think, throughout my career. So
yeah, I think some of the maybe experience about, being a woman in those roles and how you've seen some of that play out, from applying some of those skills that you learn in these types of courses for the organization.
Yeah, sure. So, I think for me, it's always been data-driven decision-making. There are kind of two passions that I have. And one is great people in terms of recruitment, development, functioning, and to put it simply, making great stuff. And whether that's making great stuff for another business or making great stuff for a consumer, that is delivered through people. And so that is super important, and it's something I'm really passionate about. And then I think the other side of that is the how that comes to life and the process that guides it. And now we hear about data this, data that, and it's been accelerated tremendously over the last, let's say, 5 to 8 years. But even if I go back to my 20s, it's always been for me, again, at the heart of that how. What is it that we have at our disposal to make decisions? And while there might be way more data now, there was always some dimension of data.
Right.
So it's kind of about how what you have to play with in what shape or form. And sometimes it's quantitative data and sometimes it's qualitative data. It's still data.
Right.
Data is an input. And so it's always been there, and it's always been the lens through, one of the lenses through which I make decisions. And again, along with then the who and how you bring it to, how you bring it to life and who will bring it to life.
Right.
And so, even if we take, obviously I've spent the last too many years in kind of marketing, let's say marketing and advertising. And when I started working for Starwood Hotels in the early 2000s, I don't like to say that. I'm so young still. At least we were working. Even before that, when I was doing management consulting, and we were at the kind of advent of CRM. The whole birth of CRM was around data and capturing data and application of data for better business outcomes.
Yeah.
And when I moved to Starwood, doing things like building algorithmic models, building lookalike models. We were doing this with, again, people. These happen to be very highly skilled, educated MIT PhDs, but we were doing it before it was automated, because that was how we decided which products we were going to add, or how we were going to reach new consumers, or how we were going to better communicate with consumers. And so it's critical, and it's even more critical today. I think what's happened, though, given the increase in volume and increase in choice, right? So there's a huge amount of data available, way more data than we ever had. And it's available through many, many more mechanisms. Right. So it's been a bit of like overwhelm. So I think that's sort of been the backlash of it is for businesses who don't start with this very much at the core of what they do. We spend time, we know each other from Google. Google was always a very data, we had data for everything. It was a very data-driven organization on everything from HR. We were talking about recruiting, right? How you gave someone an offer was all data-driven. as a leader, you had a very short, little narrow window in which you could exercise your decision-making power, because a lot of it was driven by data and history. And so, I think that if you're not an organization that is built with that at the core, you will have to learn. And for those organizations, and there are many, many of them who haven't, that's where I think there is a little bit of overwhelm, and therefore an opportunity to guide and support.
Yeah, and we see that a lot in the consulting practice, right? How do we help businesses not be so afraid to use information to make better decisions? But even, for me, not being an analyst either, the interest in this really comes from the interest of people, right? Mm-hmm. So when our analysts are kind of studying the type of data they're looking at what you and I or our friends are interested in, what's our intent to buy things, or how do we interact with a brand, or when we leave because the website loads too slow or there's too many form fields to fill in, how can we make that experience better for people so that they want to shop with certain brands, or what products are they looking at together that they hadn't even thought of. So all of that to me is really fascinating insight into how we behave as consumers and people. And I try and say to businesses, forget the number on the page, think about the visualization of these as people and what we can tell you about how to market to them better or how to interact with them more effectively, and that's even just from a marketing perspective, let alone, as you say, across the board with HR and recruitment tactics and all of that. And every business is trying to, if they're not already, they're trying to be data-led businesses. And one of the things I know that I get asked all the time, and I'm not a recruiter either, is, how do you recruit for this type of talent? What do you need to look for? How do I train them? Because I'm not an analyst. Like, what do I know? What can they do? What can't they do? Mm-hmm. And I know from you, from Dentsu, when our business was running our analytics course with Google, you guys and Google have been the biggest recruiters actually of the talent that came through that program. And that's the program now we've turned into an online warriors/academy program so that we can try and democratize it and give it to anybody that wants those skills. But how did you find the difference between, well, I guess, why did you like hiring from that pool over and above people that were coming in with, computer science degrees or with a couple of years experience? Why those type of people, and how effective were they for the agency?
Yeah, so look, recruiting is always, a combination of factors. For us, the program was amazing. We couldn't get enough graduates from the program. We always had more. Of course, there were commercial dimensions of it that I can't go into, but that obviously limited how many we could intake. But I think what I really loved about that program and the young, they were young, eager talent that came in, was being able to see, again, that blend of art and science. So for me, the number one driver is like curiosity.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't, of course, you can get someone with a computer science degree that clearly will have skill and capability. You can hire someone who can code. You could hire a data scientist. But those people may not necessarily have the curiosity that you were mentioning before to bring together the technical skills with the ability to sit in front of a client. And we're a client service business.
Yeah.
And so if I look at the graduates from that program who came into our business, they were obviously like really ambitious. They were keen to understand the technology. They were early adopters of what is like the latest and greatest. How can I get better? A real desire to continuously improve. And they were, by the way, all from in terms of a performance scale, they were all high performers. They ultimately ended up being high performers. And I think that curiosity not only made them, deliver a plethora of firsts in terms of cutting edge work with clients, it also allowed them to evolve in terms of roles in the organization.
Right.
So, and I think that's really important because when you hire young, ambitious millennials who want to have career progression, and we know that this is the case, being able to spot the EQ in them and for them themselves to be able to say, you know what, I could also apply this to something else.
Right. To a different role.
A really nice like match between, like one of the guys who started from that program is now running he's in the global partnerships.
Right.
He's doing commercials and deals. I mean, his first 3 years, he was doing a highly technical role.
Yeah.
And then as he continued in that role and got more involved with clients, and he started seeing opportunity for like, what other technology could we bring in? How could we make our partnerships better?
Yeah.
How could we help our partners to get better adoption or use of this technology? So I think that's an example that I would give of like, again, high EQ, high curiosity. So not just technical skill, but a desire to have technical skill combined with how to bring it to life in the way that the business needed it.
Yeah, and we find that I actually think it's almost the hardest thing to teach. And I've tried to do it over a number of years with different people, but it is hard. But it's super important because, as machines get better at doing what they do, that coding and those technical skills become less and less important. And even for my own kids, like I know that they're online coding and I keep questioning the language and thinking, is this even going to be the language they're going to use? Is there even any point them learning this stuff now?
Yeah.
So to me, the EQ and the storytelling and the practical application of it is far more important than a lot of those. So really for us, the program was combining the two. Like, how do we teach you enough technical skills so you know how to use the tools? But then how do you then focus on, well, then why do I need to learn this? What's my real life view of it? And a lot of the examples that we've used, because we're a business that does it ourselves, are ones that we've taken from customers or taken from businesses and said, this is a pretty common thing that comes up all the time. So we're not teaching kind of pie in the sky examples that universities might do when you take 3 months doing it and then you never use it again. It's what can you do today, tomorrow, next week, next month to be useful in the business, and how do you think about the problem solving from the business standpoint. And why I say I think it's hard to teach is every time I'd come in the room to teach those things or start talking presentation skills or start talking who are the stakeholders and who knows what they know, then everybody was like, are we learning a tool today? Because it's
right? Like, that's a, what do you call it? That's like a screening criteria right there.
Yeah.
Because those will not be, ultimately, that mindset, it becomes about mindset, and that mindset will struggle to progress.
Right.
To exactly your point. And I have children similar age, and I feel the same. For me, it's like, well, can you set up a hypothesis? Yeah. Or where is the creativity in what you're doing?
Right.
Great that you can code, so what?
Yeah.
But what is it? What is this enabling you to do, and why? And why do you care about this? It's not, I think it can be fostered, and you can set up, and this is where you get into like culture, where culture is an output, but I guess, the conditions that allow for culture in organizations. This is where it becomes so important. Because to your point, machine learning, automation, all of this stuff, it will be a great equalizer.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
So at the end of the day, what is the role of human? And I mean, it's funny because I've been thinking about this so much during this whole pandemic, and we've seen communications from every which way, from brands, from the government, from, everyone is communicating with us all the time. And it's been interesting to think about, like, who's using, like, where are these points of view coming from?
Right.
How are these decisions being made?
Yeah.
And are they taking into consideration the human factor, right? What people are experiencing, and therefore how they will feel, because it's about feeling when they receive this communication.
Yeah.
And it's all over the shop. And by the way, you can really tell the ones, like, I did this talk a few weeks ago, and I was sharing in it that one of the sustainable fashion companies that I'm on their, I get their EDMs because I think their marketing is good. And one of the emails said, it said something like, it wasn't trying to sell me anything, thank God, but it said something like, we think you've heard enough bad news, so here's some good news. And because they're sustainable, they just had a curation of like 4 really beautiful stories that had to do with, very progressive environmental measures, right? Like regeneration of a coral reef that was done by, and, they were just really heartwarming, lovely stories. And of course, as a consumer, I'm like, yeah, I'll buy their stuff again.
Yeah.
And so I thought it was like, again, going back to like, what is the insight? Like, how did they, and I wasn't in the room, so I can't tell, but clearly they did some analysis that led them to say, our customers will resonate much more with this. This would resonate much more with our customers. And if we just say, hey guys, another 15% off. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And like, we're seeing that across the board, obviously, right? As consumer behavior changes, because we're all at home. And I think that kind of brings on to, like, there's a lot of people that are obviously displaced through loss of work, or are thinking about, how do I need to reskill? Because those jobs are still there, so there's a lot of people now that are, and I'm getting a lot of that from different teams where we work with a lot of airlines, obviously, that have been really heavily affected. And they're saying, well, the job still needs to be done. Just the people that were there to do it aren't there anymore. So there is kind of a dual thing happening with people that are displaced and thinking, okay, what's my next move? And then the people that are thinking, well, actually, I've got to reskill to try and do some of these jobs that I didn't have to do before. So, like, from your perspective, and I guess we're thinking broadly about digital data literacy and what that means, there will be a lot of people thinking, well, if I don't want to be an analyst and I'm not a technical person, how by doing these types of programs would I be effective in, like, a business, I suppose. And so your example of seeing somebody go from doing a technical role into what is a commercialized role kind of shows, I guess, the breadth of how all those skills do apply. But you also gave me another example the other day that I thought was really funny, and you'll have to fill in the gaps because I can't remember if I've interpreted it correctly, but you were telling me about a lady whose business you're helping, and she was, I think, thinking of setting up Instagram or Facebook or similar, and you were basically saying, well, you don't even know how it works. Like, you don't know, like, how do you know where you're going to spend your money if you don't know how the platforms work? And I think, and I'd like you to talk through that because I thought it was really funny, but I also thought it was a really simple way to say, well, that's exactly it, right? Like, you may be wanting to run your own business, or you may be wanting to go into marketing or customer type roles, and so if you don't know what information to ask for, or information that's out there, you might not be the one actually pulling it. Yeah. But if you're not asking the right questions, then how do you know how effective you can be in the job? Yeah. So it was a really nice example, and I'd like you to tell it because I can't tell it all. But yeah.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, like you said, it runs in both directions, right? So to your point about, I also did some interviewing of CS grads from Yale and US. I mean, it was interesting development because it started as a will you mentor an upcoming graduate who's trying to decide whether to work at a tech company. I will leave the name of the company out of the conversation. And this young woman felt there was a lot of sexism, that it was a very male dominated culture and
surprise.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you asked that question, so here's my point of view on it. And she was grappling with, she'd spent time there. They'd made her a full-time offer, and do I go or not? And so that's how the conversation started. And it was funny because through this mentorship, she was like, well, what is it exactly that your company does? And then I was telling her, and she said, wow, this is so, and this is like a pretty hardcore CS grad, right? And a woman, so very rare. But she was like, God, I would have never thought about doing this. And like, this is so interesting because it's this like amazing blend of like art and science. And ultimately, like, this is what I want. And so, I think like we ended up hiring her friend. She was a friend, and we ended up hiring her. Her friend referred other people. But it was just a real eye opener for me because I thought like I never would have gone to that talent pool.
Yeah.
To like look for candidates. But yet when you put in front of these young people, like, yeah, well, this is how you take technical skills and feel good about what you're doing.
Right.
And look at it from a human dimension. They were like, this is awesome. Like, I would love to do this. So that was kind of, moving from one direction, from the left to right. And then from the example you gave, it's a, multi-million-dollar successful business based in New York City, very local business. So pretty much only operates in New York City. And, we were talking about it got started probably 5 months ago because it was the second time the founder had paid, a decent chunk of money for someone to help her with SEO. And she said, I don't understand SEO. I mean, this is such a waste of money. I said, what? SEO is so important. How could it be a waste of money, right? I mean, it's so critical to what you want to do. If you want to do lead generation. And she said, no, I did it. And I didn't generate one lead. So, this is impossible. I mean, it's impossible to do SEO and not generate a lead. So I became super curious about this and took it on as a little side project to get to the bottom of it. And, we're now working with her and we're helping her redesign her site, her UX. I mean, because it had been a very word of mouth business, she's a personality, she's written a book, people know her. So she was just kind of not even utilizing the data. She had all this data from like mailing lists, that she'd used, and she never bothered to put them into a basic CRM. And it was, like you were saying, she was like, well, I'm not on Instagram and I'm not on Facebook. And she's now pivoting because of what's happening. Her business has been affected. And she needs to communicate differently. She needs to change her offering. She needs to evolve her offering. And it would make sense because she's gone from what was a sort of higher ticket priced product to something that will be more mass. And if you want to generate sales at that mass level and at a lower price, obviously she probably should be looking at the use of an Instagram for a lead gen. And she had no idea why or what. And so this is kind of the conversation that we started having. But, the most important piece of it was like, what happened with your SEO? Why wasn't it generating leads? Who are you talking to? What other data do you have? And, this is kind of the starting point. So yeah, that's the journey we're now on. I'm just trying to help her.
Yeah, well, and I think it was just a good example, because even as like a founder myself, I don't think, ironically, we use the data that we get in our business as much as we should, but we do work really hard to do that for other businesses. But Jo, thanks for chatting to us today on our very nice backdrops from our work series. I don't know who exactly the audience is for this, but if you want more information on the training programs, I think you can reach out to ourselves, sparkline.com, or to any of the other partners that we've got involved, as well as, check out some of the free content that sits on our platform, see if it's for you.
Yeah, it's great content and it's a great program. So I really hope that, I hope for you, and I hope as well for businesses, that they take advantage of it, because it's just a great way to build the type of talent pool that we will need as we want to have successful businesses today.
Yeah, completely. Thanks, Jo. Have a great afternoon.
Okay.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.